So the first thing we're going to work on with Ephrael Stern is we're going to work on all of the armour. And the colour we're going to use for this, well, the first colour is going to be Ultramarines Blue, because we're going to cover over it with black afterwards. Now, if you've watched my previous Order of our Martyred Lady Battle Sister tutorial, you'll notice that in that one I started with Basilicanum Grey. And whilst this is absolutely something that you could do with Ephrael Stern, because she's slightly psychic, we want to give it that kind of air of being a little bit blue rather than that kind of cold grey. So we're going to be using the Ultramarines Blue instead of the Basilicanum Grey, just to kind of give her a slightly different vibe to the rest of her sisters. So we're just using this Ultramarines Blue quite sparingly, and we're just kind of doing it a section at a time. Just taking it very steady. But as I say, we are going to cover over this with Black Templar. So if it is a little bit streaky or a little bit blotchy in places, don't worry too much, because we will fix it with the Black Templar. So we just want to keep going steady like this. And once all that Ultramarines Blue is dry, we're going to use some Black Templar to coat over the layers, over the panels I should say. And we just want to try our hardest to avoid the edges, leaving that blue shining through. And with all that black applied, we're now going to establish our base coats on the cloth. And this is just so that if we do accidentally get any of this red on the black, we can just neaten it up before we highlight that black armour. So the first colour we're going to use for this stuff is we're going to be using Flesh Tearers Red. Now this is just for the interior of the cloaks. So because it's a slightly weird looking model, the interior of the cloaks are actually this part here, and of course the big part there. Now the colour we're going to use for this is Flesh Tearers Red. Now as I said, we're only doing the interior, so leave the exteriors for now, because we're going to be using Blood Angels Red for that. And what we want to do with this is we basically want to make contact with the model closest to the recess at the top, and then just in one big broad brush stroke, just pull this Flesh Tearers Red all the way to the end like that. And the application for this is going to be the same across all of these cloak areas. So you just want to keep going like this, and it just gives us a nice smooth finish on these cloaks. And next up, we're going to use some Blood Angels Red for the exterior of the cloaks. So this is everything that we've already left that's a cloak pattern. So it's like on the arms, the front of this tabard, and what is effectively the front of the cloak, just backwards, using this Blood Angels red. And with all those reds applied, we're now going to add some shade and some highlights in kind of reverse order. So the first color we're going to use is a mixture of 6:1 contrast medium and Cygor Brown, and this is a glaze for the inside of the cloak, just to give it that real kind of dark, reddy, browny look that it has on the box art. So we take this this glaze, and we take the little bit of fluff off the brush, and then on the inside of the cloak, we just want to start painting this glaze all over that Flesh Tearers red that we've already applied. And next up, once that Cygor Brown glaze is dry on all of the interiors of the robes, we're going to use some thinned down Evil Sun Scarlet to give all of the edges across both sides of the robe a highlight. So we take our Evil Sun Scarlet and just start picking out these kind of raised details. So we just want to apply this like edge highlight like this. And then next up, once all of that Evil Sun Scarlet is dry, we're going to take some thinned down Fire Dragon Bright, and we're just going to apply this to the outside of the cloak, so the Blood Angels red parts, rather than the Flesh Tearers red Cygor Browny bits. And we just want to do this as like a small spot highlight across the sharpest areas of these cloaks, just like I'm doing here. And then lastly, for all those red cloaks, we're going to use a roughly 6:1 mix of contrast medium and Flesh Tearers red as a small glaze just over these red details. So we just want to, very carefully, we don't want loads on the brush at once. We just want to paint this all over those cloaks. Like this, just to tie all of these highlights together. And with all of that red done, we're now going to use some FENRISIAN grey to highlight the black. And with all that done, we can now start working on the rest of the details. But so far, we've got a really nice looking Ephrael Stern, and the two main portions of the model are complete. So we're making excellent progress here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly do the purity seals because it's a nice easy win. And we're going to use some skeleton horde just on these floating bits of paper right here and here. And with that skeleton horde applied, we're going to take a little bit of MAGOS purple and we're just going to colour in the two little wax seals. And there's one just in here. and the other one is just in there. And we're also going to use this MAGOS purple for the hand guard for the grip on the sword. And next up we're going to colour in all the silver details, and we're going to be using some thinned down Iron Warriors for this. And next up, with that Iron Warriors applied, we're going to take some thinned down RETRIBUTOR armour and paint in all the gold details. And next up, we're going to give all of that silver a shade of Basilicanum grey. And next up, we want to give all of that RETRIBUTOR armour a shade of AGGAROS Dunes. And with that done, the next colour we're going to use is Snakebite Leather. And this is just for that, the leather that's, you can see just on the front here. So there's this little pouch. And then there's also this sort of belt. We just want to leave those little rosary beads. And next up we want to use some Apothecary white, and this is for all the white details. So this is for things like the emblem on the shoulders, her hair, the rosary beads, and the little fleur-de-lis just here on this icon. And with all of that done, we're now going to apply some highlights to the model. And the first ones we're going to do are the white ones. And these are going to be using some thinned down ULTHUAN grey. So we just want to, for example, on this eye, we just want to pick out the whole of the eye. So we want that to be nice and bright. But on the wings, we just want to pick out the edges of each of the sculpted feathers, I guess you would call they are, on that kind of aquila. So we just want to use a small amount and just very carefully start picking out each of these. Like this. Similarly, on the hair, we just want to pick out each of these individual strands of hair with the ULTHUAN grey. And on the prayer beads, just want to pick out each bead like this. So we're just going to keep going around doing this for all of these white details, and then we'll come back. And with that ULTHUAN grey applied, we're now going to highlight all of the silver using some Iron Hand Steel. And next up, we're going to use some Liberator gold to give all of those gold details a highlight. And with all those gold details done, we're now going to paint the face. And the colour we're going to be using for this is GUILLIMAN Flesh. We don't want loads on our brush as we do this, because we want her skin to be quite pale and soft. So we just want to start up here at the brow. Just pull this GUILLIMAN Flesh down like this. And once that GUILLIMAN Flesh is dry, we're going to take some thinned down FLAYED 1 flesh. And we're going to apply some highlights. So we just want to do this across all the sharpest features of the face. So areas like the nose, the eyebrows, the cheekbones and her eyelids as well, and all these kinds of areas. And next up, we want to use some Screaming Skull just to paint in the teeth. And next up, we want to use a small amount of Volupus pink, not very much at all, to paint in her tongue. And with that done, just before we do the eyes, we want to use a little bit of ULTHUAN grey just to apply a highlight to this power nodule here, and then to draw a few small lightning lines. Just coming off it like that with this ULTHUAN grey. And then to finish off, we want to use some TALASSAR Blue, and this is for the psychic energy on her eyes and also on the sword. So we use a very small amount of this TALASSAR Blue just around those eyelids. Like this. And we use the TALASSAR Blue over those ULTHUAN grey lightning spots that we put in on the sword, as well as just coating it over the base of the blade. Like this. And again, just to finish it off, we use a small amount of ULTHUAN grey just as a highlight. Like this. We do the same thing on the blade, just to give it that glow. And with that, Ephrael Stern is now finished. So what we need to do is work on the base. So the colour that we're going to use for this is Basilicanum Grey, and this is for all the stonework. Now it looks very complicated to begin with, but actually it's very, very simple. What we do is we take our Basilicanum Grey and we pick a place to start, and let's start down here, and we basically just paint this brick by brick. like this. And next up, we want to use some Blood Angels Red for the left-hand cable. This one. So our left hand. And then we want to use some IYANDEN yellow for the other cable. And next up, we want to use some Iron Warriors just for the tips of the cable. And for these support strut things that are holding it tied in, holding those cables tied into the wall, or rather failing to do so. And next up, we want to use some black Templar to paint in some chevrons and hazard stripes along the yellow cable. Just want to pick a place to start. I'm going to start here in the middle. We just want to draw some straight black lines going all the way down. And next up, we're going to coat in what the rest of the base is going to look like. And for this particular version of Ephrael Stern, it's going to be a deserty, grimy, sort of soily kind of place. So we're going to be using some Armageddon dust. And the reason we're doing this now is because we want to give all of that stonework and the soil a dry brush. We want to do it all at the same time so it's a consistent colour and it ties the whole base together rather than have to do 2 sets of dry brushing. Once all that Armageddon dust is dry, we're going to use 2 colours to give it a wash. We're going to use AGGAROS Dunes and WYLDWOOD. And what we want to basically do is we're going to use the AGGAROS Dunes as our kind of full shade all over this color, this texture paint. You notice it doesn't do a hell of a lot, but just occasionally, whilst it's still wet, we give the brush a quick wash, and we just take a small amount of WYLDWOOD and we just add it in kind of fairly sporadically to all of that AGGAROS Dunes, just to give us a couple of variations in the colours. And next up, we're going to give Ephrael Stern's base a dry brush of Tyrant Skull. We want to do this all over all of that Armageddon dust and AGGAROS Dunes and WYLDWOOD, but also we want to do it all over the stones as well, just to give them all a bit of a highlight. I've added some tufts to the base, which means the only thing left to do is to give the rim a coat or two of black Templar. And there you have it, Ephrael Stern all done and dusted, ready to smite the enemies of the Emperor with bolter, blade and, well, her brains. Psychic brains. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed this one. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.